Welcome, everyone. Lovely to see you all. I'm delighted to be hosting this last Q&A of the year. It's been very quickly how the year has gone by, but now this is our sixth time gathering with questions to bring to Jitsuma Tenzin Palmo. So Jitsuma, thank you very much for giving us the opportunity throughout the year to ask you questions and bring the doubts from people from all over the world in this platform that at least keeps us connected in a way. And we really appreciate the blessing of having this opportunity. And of course, I want to thank everyone who also brought some questions to the table and sent in their contribution, because it's really nice to be able to hold these sessions. But even if Jitsuma and I came here, and if we had no questions from anyone there, this wouldn't be happening. So thank you all, really. And I would encourage all of you to continue to be curious and keep asking questions. So Jitsuma, shall we just go straight into the first question?
Surely.
So we begin with number 1. If you had the opportunity to go back in time with all the experience you have gathered with your Western mind about Asian Buddhist culture and practice, which path would you redesign for yourself? Which things will you avoid to make the best use of your life?
Yeah, that's a kind of curious question. And I thought about it, right? But I think, everything happens in accordance with our past karma. So I can't imagine my life happening any other way than as it did. And I certainly do not want to redesign the path in accordance with my own lack of wisdom and my self-cherishing mind, to make the path comfortable according to my ideas, right? And so, in fact, when I look back, the most traditional time of my life, which was when I spent 18 years in Lahore, then that was, at that time I was completely immersed in the traditional Tibetan way of doing things. And I was extremely happy, and it was a very fulfilling time of my life, and I certainly wouldn't want to change that in any way. And when I look back in my life, it seems one bit leads into the next bit, leads into the next bit. And I often feel like I'm riding in a boat, and the boat is just sailing itself. I'm not in charge of it. It just goes where it's going to go. And I just lean back and watch the view. So I can't really think that there's anything that I would wish to change. I mean, things happen how they happen, and now here we are.
I think that's a very nice answer, Jitsuma, very much in line with Buddhist thoughts. So, yes.
Whatever.
Lovely. So then let's move on to the next one. Some people have life-changing experiences related to Dharma. These experiences urge us to jump with everything to make the best use of this life. So with this decision, a great ocean of teachers and Dharma teachings appear, and we get lost. So apart from continuing to do whatever practice one is doing with determination and faith, is there a way to overcome the obstacle of getting lost with so many options? Or should we keep in mind the Sangha experience awaiting for Maitreya? Could you perhaps talk a little bit to that last part of the question? What is it referring to?
Well, the point is that Sangha was meditating on Maitreya Buddha, and he meditated like for 6 years, and he didn't get so much as a good vision or any good experience, and he left, and then he saw someone doing something really, I forget what they were doing. I mean, chipping away at a big boulder in order to get more light into their house, etc., etc. And he thought, well, if they expend so much effort on such a totally meaningless thing, then what to speak of me, who I'm doing something really important, like, doing my practice to realize Maitreya Buddha. And so he goes back and he tries another 3 years, and again nothing happens, and then again he goes and he sees someone kind of filing down a big piece of metal in order to make a needle. And I mean, all these things which he sees are just very obvious examples of futility and the amount of effort we put into utterly useless occupations instead of putting a little bit of effort into what really matters. So then he goes back again. Anyway, in the end, he spends 12 years in retreat, and then again, nothing happens, and he's just so discouraged. And so then he goes out and says, I give up. And he wanders along and he sees this old bitch, this old dog lying on the side of the road, and her stomach is all open, and there are all these maggots eating her. And he just feels so, so sorry, such compassion. But he thinks, well, if I lean down and I take the maggots with my fingers, I might squash a maggot, and that will hurt the maggot. So I must be very careful. So what I'll do is I'll lick the maggots off with my tongue. But because she stank so horribly and looked so ghastly with all these maggots eating her up, he knelt down and he closed his eyes. He stuck out his tongue and he leaned further and further and further and further and further until finally his tongue hit the earth. And then he looked up and there was Maitreya. And so a Sangha said, so what kept you so long? Now I've been doing all this practice, and where were you? And then Maitreya says, actually from the very beginning I was always with you, but because of your obscurations you couldn't see me. Because of your practice you have cleared away almost all your obscurations, but just a little bit left, so that when you saw me as a maggoty old dog. But because of your great compassion, you have cleared away all the obscurations. Now you can see me as I really am. And so a Sangha looked a bit dubious and said, yeah, well, maybe. And then Maitreya said, well, if you don't believe me, put me on your shoulder and go into town and ask people what they see. So he puts Maitreya on his shoulder and he carries him into town, and he asks everybody, what do I have on my shoulder? And everybody says, you don't have anything on your shoulder. And then eventually he meets one old woman who is very pious and has very few obscurations. And she says, you have a mangy old dog on your shoulder. What for? So then he believes that Maitreya is exactly that. In other words, it's always with us. But because of our obscurations, we don't see. I mean, not just Maitreya, but the nature of the mind. I mean, the nature of the mind, our inherent Buddha nature, is always with us. But we can't see it. That's our problem. And this is why we need to do all these practices in order to purify our vision, so that we have pure vision instead of impure vision. So I would say, honestly and truthfully, in answering these other questions, depending on our life circumstances, it's obviously good to build a strong spiritual foundation in this very lifetime and do the very best we can, right? So what do we need to do? Well, we need to make the mind calm, clear, and insightful. We need to gain more inner wisdom, right? And also to cultivate, of course, more kindness and compassion. I mean, this is what finally cleared away the obscurations from a Sangha, was his tremendous, overwhelming compassion, not only for the mangy dog, but also for the maggots. So we must have more kindness and compassion towards others, but also towards ourselves, right? The Buddha said we start with giving loving kindness and compassion to ourselves, our poor little egos, which need to be healed in order to be seen through, right? We have to have healthy ego to walk the path towards non-ego. That's really very important. So, you know, yes, I know, especially nowadays, there are 1,000 different practices, and every teacher proclaims their practice as the supreme. And, you know, it's very confusing. So I think for most of us who have very busy and complicated lives already, it is good to keep our practice very simple, right, and practical. Then sometimes if we have time, we can do specific other practices, right? Maybe over the weekend or for a week or a month or whatever, we can do another practice specifically. But in general, day by day, we should have a very basic, simple practice which we just keep continuing and try to integrate with our daily life as much as possible, right? So I was thinking, you know, we start, you know, with refuge and bodhicitta, then maybe some shamatha, maybe some metta meditation, loving kindness meditation, then some kind of simple visualization, Tara or Chenrezig or whatever we feel connected with. But especially we should practice becoming more conscious, more aware. And also, you know, more mindful and more open-hearted during the day as much as possible. And use our day for cultivating the paramitas, like our generosity and patience and so forth, right? Then in the evening, maybe just, you know, at the end of the day, some very simple, basic awareness meditation, some basic shamatha. If we know dream yoga, then dream yoga is good. At least we should try to recognize our dreams when we're dreaming, to recognize this is a dream. That's always useful because it helps us to recognize our daily life as a dream too, right? So my feeling is that really you should design your own program, but stick to it, rather than doing a bit of this, a bit of that, a bit of something else, digging shallow holes. We should keep digging our main hole and just keep digging down till we get to the underground source of the water, and then it will spring up, just like a Sangha. Okay?
So let's move on to the third question. Why is it that sometimes when we meet some Rinpoches or old serious practitioners, we lose sense of our body and the mind gets very expanded and clear?
Well, that's excellent. Good. Well, it's because really experienced practitioners themselves are in a natural state of pure awareness, right? They're in a state of pure consciousness. And so their minds are very open and spacious without dualistic grasping. So therefore, when we are in their presence, if we're open to them, then we receive their blessing. I mean, that's the whole point. As I often say, Trungpa Rinpoche, Chögyam Trungpa Rinpoche said it was like a corridor with two doors. And the Lama's door is always open. But whether or not our door is open depends on us. And we open our door through our open heart and our devotion and just being present with the, you know, if we meet a great master, we should just stop and just try to be present. Then the blessing is there. The blessing is definitely there. The whole time the sun is shining. Whether we pull the curtains together and close the doors is up to us.
Yeah, keeping an open heart and a clear mind.
Yeah, well, especially when you're in the presence of great masters. And it doesn't matter if you're sitting straight in front of them or whether you're in a crowd of several hundred. That's irrelevant. I mean, because the sun is shining. And the important thing is that we ourselves have to open to the sun.
So I was saying, regarding the previous question, Jitsumala, I made a note that I wanted to follow up on question number 2. Traditionally, what we're supposed to contemplate when we don't have enough enthusiasm, because we were in connection to what the question is saying, you know, the whole thing with Asanga and whatnot. traditionally, we were saying that a lot of people put so much effort in things that can be very mundane. And if they use that, enthusiasm, that ability to be disciplined into the Dharma, they would probably get enlightened very quickly. And when we lack that, traditionally we're taught to meditate on the four thoughts that turn the mind, right? But sometimes to the modern practitioner, they might feel a little bit heavy or a little bit not in accordance to the modern times, perhaps. Do you have any advice or do you have any suggestions on what to meditate, what to contemplate on when we don't find that enthusiasm? Because the main thing is, yes, we should definitely go out and practice as much as possible. But when we find enthusiasm for running a marathon and not for Dharma practice, what should we do?
Well, I mean, it's a real problem, and many people face this. I think that one thing is that we should think of the advantages it would be, how much better we would feel if we had a regular practice, even if it was a short regular practice. I mean, as the Buddha said, let the wise man tame his mind. A well-tamed mind brings happiness. And recognizing that most of our troubles are because we have ill-tamed minds, then we should encourage ourselves to try our best to deal with our monkey minds, because a monkey mind is very unstable and it brings a lot of trouble to ourselves and to others. And, with all the other thoughts that we can do to bring the mind to the path, in the end we want to be happy. And we don't want to suffer. And so the happiest mind is a well-tamed mind. And only we can tame our minds. No one else can tame it for us. And like any other skill, if we don't put a bit of effort into it, we're not going to master that skill. And the mind is an extremely tricky, but even just a little bit of practice makes us feel that much better, and a certain satisfaction that at least we sat down and did it. Not 3-hour marathons, but, at least 10, 20 minutes, you can manage that, in a day, come on, And then, gradually we see, yeah, actually we can do this. It's not so impossible. We can, and then we feel, like with anything, if you make, the effort to accomplish, then you feel that inner satisfaction that you've done something worthwhile during the day. So like that, bit by bit, step by step.
And would you say then that rejoicing in our own practice is definitely a component of that?
Oh yes, I mean the Buddha himself, when he taught, he said, we first give friendliness and loving kindness to ourselves, and then compassion, but then we rejoice. We rejoice. I mean, sympathetic joy sounds kind of sad somehow. I don't know, the English, sympathetic is always like you're pitying somebody. But mudita means to rejoice in the goodness, right? We don't just think of all the bad things and all the things we've done wrong, but we also think of the things which we've done right, and the things which are easy for us to do, the good things which are easy for us, as well as the things which are difficult. And in that we encourage ourselves, just as we would encourage another, by pointing out, when they do something good, well done, so we can also say well done to ourselves and encourage ourselves to recognize that we do have the possibility to change and to transform and to tame the mind. Yes, we can. Otherwise, the Buddha would not have told us to do so.
Thank you so much, Itsumala, for that beautiful expansion of that question. So now we can go on to question number 4. If you had the opportunity to ask the Buddha a question, what would you ask him?
Yeah, I thought about that. And I thought, okay, well, actually and truthfully, what I would ask the Buddha is that since he always emphasized and believed in the Fourfold Sangha of monastics and lay, male and female both, did he really object to women joining the monastic order? Or was this just a later prejudice put in by the monks? Because the way it's put is always that the Buddha said, oh, you know, the Dharma now will never last, and it's like putting the apple in a barrel of good apples. I mean, I can't believe the Buddha would ever have been so misogynist. And if he was, then he wasn't a Buddha.
For those who don't know about it, could you please expand a little bit on the whole way the story is presented, and how Ananda was also involved in that, and how it went?
Well, I mean, during the time of the Buddha, straight after that, then a lot of young men from his Sakya clan left the home life and became monks. And so a lot of women were left basically as widows. And also the Buddha's father died, and so the Buddha's stepmother, Mahaprajapati, she also was left as a widow. And so then she decided, along with her said to be 500, meaning a lot, court ladies, they decided that they wanted to become nuns. And this was in the early years, about 6 years after the Buddha had started the male Sangha, so it was very early. And they went to the Buddha, and he said, you know, don't even talk about it, and off he went. And then they walked also after him barefoot, and they were very tired, and they were all crying outside. And Ananda, who was the nephew of Prajapati, because he was the Buddha's cousin, he said, he went up to her and said, what is it? And she said, well, we all want to leave the household life, we want to be nuns, but the Buddha says no. So then Ananda went to the Buddha and he said, look, your stepmother, she's out there and she's crying with all these ladies, they've walked for hundreds of miles, and they're completely exhausted, but they really want to be nuns. Why can't they be nuns? And so according to the official, the Buddha said, no. And then eventually Ananda said, well, are women not capable of attaining to the goal of the path, to nirvana? And the Buddha said, well, of course they are. And he said, so therefore, why are you creating this obstacle by not allowing them to go forth? So then the Buddha said, all right, Ananda, all right, okay, we'll do it. But as a result of this, the Dharma will only last for 1,000 years. And it's, as I say, like a bad apple put in a basket full of good apples. Blah, 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 blah. So then he called Mahaprajapati and he said, Ehi Bhikkhuni. And then he told the monks to ordain all the other women. Now, this is the official story, and so therefore it's always regarded that nuns were not wanted and that they were created, a big obstacle, which is, as we can see, historically totally ridiculous because, for one thing, we're 2,500 years down the road, and if the Buddha said it was only going to last 1,000 years, he didn't have much cognizance. Secondly, the important one, I think the reason why the Buddha might have been hesitant, is because in those days there were no monasteries. And where was he going to put these women? Everybody was living in those days out in the forest under trees. And that's okay for the boys, but it's not a good idea for the women. And also these were court women. These were not village women, right? They weren't used to a rough life and begging for their food and so forth. So I think the Buddha saw it at the beginning as being rather like St. Francis when Chiara came to him and said, okay, I'm going to be a nun, I've left home. And he didn't know what to do with her, I mean, yeah, he's St. Francis of Assisi. I mean, all his friars could wander around and that's fine, but you can't have women wandering around. So I think, but what we should remember is that at the very, very beginning, after the Buddha got enlightened, there is a sutra at the end of the Buddha's life, Mara, who is like the example of all forces opposed to enlightenment. He came to the Buddha and he said, okay, Buddha, do you remember when you were just had been enlightened under the tree? I came to you and said, okay, now you've attained your goal, you can leave. And you said to me, oh no, Mara, I cannot leave until my fourfold Sangha is firmly established. So that is male and female monastics and male and female laity. And so then Mara said to the Buddha, now your fourfold Sangha is well established, so now you can go. And then the Buddha said, yes, it's okay, I'm going, so don't be in a hurry. And sometime after that, he entered Mahaparinibbana. But the point was that right from the start, he had the idea of a fourfold Sangha. It wasn't something which he came up with later, so it's not possible that he could have been opposed to female monastics, which are a part of the Fourfold Sangha, which he described as being like a table with 4 legs, very stable. And how the Fourfold Sangha, everybody, that's not just monastics but lay people also, should study and practice and propagate the Dharma. And he said when that Fourfold Sangha is very strong, then the Dharma is secure, and that is a genuine middle or Buddhist country. And if you don't have that Fourfold Sangha, it's not a Buddhist country. So all those who are opposed to the female ordination, higher ordination, like the Tibetans, for a good example, are not actually, they're only a 3.5 leg table, which sounds to me quite unstable. So, yes. So if I saw the Buddha face to face, I'd say, oh, Bhagavan, is it really true that you were opposed to the ordination of women? And he would say, no, my dear. That's all propaganda put out by the monks.
Yes, I think so too, Jitsumala. And I would just like to share very briefly this image of Mahapajapati so that people can see her and know about her.
Yes, she was a very powerful lady. And somebody called Wendy Garling has written a wonderful biography of her. And you see how utterly extraordinary she was. And yet nobody's ever even heard of her. I mean, the Tibetans, they don't know about her at all.
So with this, we really join you in prayer, Jitsumala, that the Fourfold Sangha in this world flourishes and gets thoroughly established. And definitely we need to make it happen.
Well, it's happening now. I mean, in modern times, when the laity are now so well educated, they can read all the books, they can attend all the lectures and understand. And now they themselves, both male and female, are becoming the scholars and writing the books and becoming the teachers. And often they know more about the Dharma than the monks do, and have done a lot more practice. And so now that side of the Sangha is really coming up. So now the side the one part which needs now to really be encouraged and stabilized is that of the nuns. That they need to also take their place so that the table has 4 equal legs and is very, very stable.
Thank you so much, Itsuma, for reminding all of us about the importance of the Fourfold Sangha and for always being at the forefront of the, I wouldn't call it a fight, but it's a pledge for equality and for the fair treatment of all monastics, both men and women.
Yeah, and for lay people too, because I mean now is the time when the laity are not just there in the role of supporting the Sangha, but in the role of study and practice and propagating the Dharma in the way that the Buddha himself envisioned. So this is a very unique time in many ways, and we should be careful with it, but nonetheless it is something which up to now never quite ever happened in a Buddhist country.
Okay, so let's see the next question, number 5. Do you think that the core teachings given by the Buddha are a little bit lost because of the incorporation of cultural aspects like Bon or Hindu perspectives? How can one clear the teachings of those cultural aspects?
Well, you know, I think that the core teachings of the Buddha are still very, very clear even today. You know, I mean, there are certain... Buddhism is a very, what can I say? I mean, yes, we all know it's very, did I come up with the word?
Adaptable?
Adaptable, that was the word, yes. It's very adaptable to whatever culture it meets. So therefore you have, you know, Chinese Buddhism, Thai Buddhism, Sri Lankan Buddhism, Tibetan Buddhism, Japanese Buddhism. And on the outer looking, it looks very, very different. But, you know, I always think of it like, you know, you have a vessel, you know, like here, this is glass. It could be gold, it could be porcelain, it could be copper, and looks very different, maybe different shape. But the water inside, the nectar inside is the same. And I think that this is very extraordinary in Buddhism, that 1,000 years after all these different traditions dispersed, now when they all come back together, despite the outer differences, the inner Dharma is extraordinarily alike. I mean, the Dharma, the view is amazing how they've kept the view. All these, you know, hundreds and hundreds of years of being separated. They're all Buddhist. And so I wouldn't worry too much personally. You know, my concern is more that Westerners tend to prune the tree too much and getting back to the real Buddhism, which really just means what is comfortable for me and doesn't push my buttons too much. You know, we have to be very careful not to make the Buddhism in accordance with our own inner prejudices and throw away too much. Better to keep more than to throw away too much. And so, yeah, of course, you know, offering butter lamps and offering, you know, water bowls is not, and the Buddha didn't walk around with water bowls, right? So, yes, that is all part of what feels comfortable for Tibetans. I mean, the way Tibetans do ritual would be totally incomprehensible to Naropa or Tilopa. I mean, they had their own way of doing their rituals, which would not, you know, which was suitable for India. And the way Tibetans or the Chinese or the Japanese or the Thais do it is what feels comfortable for them. But at the same time, there is a vast amount of Dharma which everybody is in agreement with. And we should be careful to keep that, as I say, and not throw away, be too exuberant in throwing away too much too soon. I mean, you know, it's not that we are trying to become Tibetans or Japanese or you know, Thais. That's very truthful. My Lama himself, one of the first things he said was, always remember that Tibetan Buddhism is half culture and half Dharma. And you can throw away the culture, don't throw away the Dharma. But, you know, of course, as I always say, it's not like this culture, this is Dharma, so you go like this, because they've become so integrated. It's very difficult, especially for Tibetans, to see what is just their culture and what is actual genuine Dharma. But if we're not careful, we tend to throw away anything which doesn't fit in. At the moment, I'm reading this book by somebody called Roger Jackson on rebirth. And exactly what I'm dealing with right now is how keen Westerners are to throw out rebirth, and that the Buddha obviously didn't believe in it really, because they don't believe in it really, right? So rather than changing ourselves to fit with the Dharma, we try to change the Dharma to fit with ourselves and our own preconceptions. So that's where we have to be careful, not to throw out the bits which don't feel comfortable just because they don't feel comfortable. Maybe we should put it aside and then go back and look at it again.
Some healthy skepticism is sometimes good, but we tend to go overboard, I guess.
Well, you know, it's very easy to try to adapt something so that it feels, you know, as I say, you know, it doesn't push our boundaries. But sometimes we need our boundaries to be pushed.
Thank you, Jitsumala. Let's go to the next question. I'd like to know more about how does one gain realizations and how does one know that one has gained some realization? I assume that gaining realizations is a gradual process.
It can be very immediate. Realization of what? Well, there are many things to be realized. The ultimate realization is the nature of the mind. I mean, the problem is that our minds are naturally dualistic. You know, there's me and everything else not me. And so what we're trying to realize is that state of consciousness which is beyond dualism, which is our pure consciousness, which is considered to be not just empty, but also luminous clarity and cognizance, pure knowing without the knower. That's what we've got to realize. Now, normally when we get a glimpse, and that can happen quite spontaneously, that is not so difficult. I mean, you know, lamas point out the nature of the mind and so forth. The problem is to stabilize that realization. That's the challenge. It's like, you know, you're looking at all the clouds and then the clouds part and you see the sky and you go, ah, sky, boom. And one of the problems is the ego grasps it immediately and thinks, aha, look, I'm almost enlightened. And then the ego wants it back again. But the very thing which is obstructing our realization of the nature of the mind is the ego. So therefore we are in this quandary, because on the one hand it's the very ego and the ego grasping which is preventing us from seeing our true nature. But at the same time, if we don't try, we won't get to see our true nature. So this is always why it's a balance. Because on the one hand, yes, we have to want to see the nature, but on the other hand, who wants to see the nature? Well, the dualistic, conceptual, egoic mind wants to see it, in which case that is the very thing which is obstructing us from seeing it. So this is the play, and why, you know, even great masters spend years and years in retreat. Because, you know, one thing to get glimpses, but another thing to actually be able to familiarize ourselves with that realization at all times. That's what's gradual. The actual realization is spontaneously there. What is gradual is the familiarization. That takes time.
Would you then make a distinction, Jitsumala, between glimpsing and actually realizing? Or is there both are realizations?
No, I would say they're realizations. I mean, it's all tokpa, but
But you stabilize it.
But to stabilize it, that, you know, like with our yogis, our Tokdens, right? Yeah, they might get a glimpse and many glimpses, but to get to that point where they are able to see it any minute, oh, there it is, no problem, they say. And you say, yes, thank you. You know, because for them it is a reality at all times. And of course it's so simple that often it could be that one would miss it because you're expecting it to be, you know, lights and trumpets. And it's actually the basic simplicity, the ultimate simplicity of our consciousness. So it's compared to space. We can't see space, we can't grasp space. But nothing would exist if it were not for space. So this is getting back to our basic consciousness. In Mahamudra, in fact, it's called ordinary mind. Tamaji Shepa. But it doesn't mean our ordinary mind.
Right. We'll be able to even glimpse the true pure nature of our minds.
Yes, I mean, as you know, in Dzogchen it's called Rikpa. Rikpa is the Sanskrit for jhana, which just vidya. And vidya just means knowing, knowledge. You know, it's that knowing aspect of the mind beyond knower and known, just knowing. And that's why it interconnects us with everything, whereas our ordinary dualistic mind separates us from everything.
So let's move on to the 7th question. And it says, I have been practicing Vipassana meditation according to Goenka's teachings for many years, but continuously for 3 years, 2 hours per day. And I have observed the immense benefits that the practice brings. However, lately I listened to other Buddhist practitioners to say that this technique is good but limited. And on the other hand, in the organization itself, there is only room for Goenka's words. The above has made me feel a little disappointed and limited. Do you have any opinion about it?
Yeah. Well, you know, of course, Goenka's method is really very good and it's very clear. And it does bring excellent results for those who continue to practice regularly. I mean, even our nuns did, for 2 years, they did a 10-day Goenka retreat. And they really liked it and really benefited from it. But, and the big but, is that it is not, of course, the only way. That is the problem. The Dharma is very inclusive. It's not narrow and biased. Even in the Mahasatipatthana Sutra of the Pali Canon, the Buddha recommends many different approaches. And the mindfulness on sensations is just one of them. I mean, there are many, many different ways that the Buddha recommends, right? So this is the shortcoming with the Goenka approach. I mean, it's become like a cult. And why the nuns stopped doing Goenka retreats was because they were told they couldn't keep up their commitments and they couldn't do anything else, and this was really the only way. And they felt very, very uncomfortable with that. So they said, no, we don't want to do it anymore, even though they enjoyed doing it while they were doing it. So the point, to my mind, the crucial point is awareness, not really the object of the awareness, right? So any method which brings us to a recognition of the non-dual pure awareness behind our conceptual mind is a good path. So if in the Goenka system at a certain point they drop the object and just are in a state of pure awareness, recognizing the awareness, being aware of the awareness, not the object of the awareness. It's the awareness itself which is what is so crucial. Then if they do that, then it's a totally valid path. Totally valid. But it's not the only path.
Fair enough, Jitsumala. That's really a very good way of analyzing that, really. I do agree that the practice is very nice, but a little bit narrow.
Well, it's become narrow. It wasn't in the beginning. But, I mean, I even had a friend who had done many, many Goenka retreats. But then she also was doing shamatha, for goodness sake. And they rejected her for another course because she was now doing shamatha. They would reject the Buddha himself. I mean, at that point, it's no longer Buddha Dharma. It's Goenka Dharma, you know, and that's not the same thing.
Question number 8 says, how do I stay grounded in the present moment when it feels unbearable?
Well, it seems to me what is unbearable is our resistance to the present moment. The present just is. And then either we accept it or we reject it. And that is what causes the suffering. The Buddha taught there are two sufferings, right? There's physical suffering and there's mental suffering. So physical suffering is unavoidable. We are all going to get sick from time to time. We're all going to have problems with our physical, because we have a physical body. But the mental suffering, which goes along with the physical suffering, is optional. We don't have to suffer. I mean, even those lamas who were in prison for 20 or 30 years in hard labor camps, who were interrogated, beaten, tortured, at the end of that, they emerged radiant and full of love and compassion. I mean, you make them, They were just radiating love and grateful for the difficulties, because it really taught them how to practice. So, even the most unbelievably, apparently unbearable circumstances are transformed by our response to those circumstances. Right? It's not the circumstances, it's how we respond. So I would say relax into the present moment and just be aware without any judgment and with an open heart which will accept whatever is. Because it all comes from within us. It's not out there. We blame external circumstances and problems, but really our happiness or unhappiness depends on the mind. So be with the present moment, just as it is, and don't think this is a good moment or a bad moment. It just is.
Brilliant, Jitsumala. And if I may, because I just saw now how this definitely connects with question 11 and question 12, actually. So I'll just read those questions, and if you have anything to add to it, I think you really basically covered it with what you just said. Question 11 says, how do we deal with an ill body which is failing? And then question 12 says, I have a difficulty motivating myself when I'm sick or cold or with other ailments. How can I reassure myself that I can do my formal practice when on my deathbed I'm probably racked with pain and suffering?
Yeah, well, I mean, my feeling was we have to accept old age, sickness, and death. I mean, it's common to all living beings. And so, you have to accept that sometimes we get sick. What can you hope for? I was thinking that it's good to practice Tonglen, taking in the pain, giving out the relief. Or, even if we have a failing body, if we have a clear mind, we can still practice, right? Even if we're lying down, that doesn't matter, right? We can read, we can listen to audiobooks if we can't read. I mean, we can pray for the world and all the beings who are suffering as we are suffering at this moment. Well, then, may all beings be well and happy. We can give compassion to our body as well as to the body of others, reaching out to our families, our friends, and to our attendants, our nurses, anyone who comes to see us, wishing deeply that they should be well and happy. Everybody that you see has problems, right? They have difficulties that they're dealing with, not just me. Everybody, everywhere. So extend compassion all around. Stop being self-centered and thinking, poor me, right? We can do a lot even while we're sick. And also we should extend to our love and our compassion to all the beings that we see, seeing that it's not just me that's having problems. Everybody has problems. But this person who's worrying about what's going to happen at death if they don't make any efforts now, I would say that unless you make some effort to rally yourself during a minor sickness, it's unlikely that you will actually manage when you are seriously ill and near death. So we should not always be making excuses. I'm talking to myself. That is just laziness, right? So even if you can't do a formal long practice, we can do short practices, you know, a little short practices on shamatha or tonglen or awareness, which we can do lying down or anywhere, you know. Send loving kindness. Make a commitment. Make a commitment to do a simple practice for, say, 10 minutes, 20 minutes every day. Make that commitment. Think if you were actually dying right now, what would you want to do? Now we're coming up into the new year, so it's a very good time to make commitments. I mean, I know we break them next day, but nonetheless, to make that resolution, a simple resolution, not a huge, great, big resolution that we're not going to keep, but a simple resolution that we can keep. Like to sit and do some shamatha for 5 minutes every day, some metta for 5 minutes every day. Anybody can do 10 minutes, come on. And, you know, then gradually as we realize this is really a very nice thing to do with our time, we can extend it, you know. And especially when we're sick, this is a wonderful time to do tonglen, visualizing all that sickness coming into ourselves from all these other beings and all the other beings being free from sickness. How wonderful that would be. Wouldn't that be wonderful? I mean, just think of it. If one could think that all the beings who are suffering as I am suffering, all their sickness came on me and they were free. Wouldn't that be wonderful? I mean, really, how wonderful that would be if one could do that. And so even the aspiration to be able to do that makes meaning to our sickness and ceases to be a suffering and becomes a source of genuine opening of the heart to compassion. So, you know, we have to be a little bit inventive and stop feeling sorry for ourselves.
We can also remember Shantideva when he said, there is nothing whatsoever that doesn't become easier through habituation. So by habituating ourselves with small pains, we can then endure big pain.
Exactly that. And I mean, all of this is really true. All of this is really true. And we have to recognize that whatever situation we are in, this is our opportunity to practice. And not think that it's only when we're in an ideal situation, you know, in an ideal environment and perfect health and bloom and youth and all that, that's when I'm going to practice, and the rest of the time I cannot. Because it's simply not true. And then that really is just laziness, right? I mean, we give it fancy names, but it's really just being lazy. And then when the time for death comes, we go, oops. And then we recognize how we wasted all our time on things which are of no use. And the one thing which really could have benefited ourselves and others, we neglected to do. And it's not even because we don't know, which most people don't. But we do, because we met with the Rama. So we have no excuse.
So question number 9 says, my question is regarding the Nyam that arise during practice. I understand the importance of not getting hung up on them, but can you please explain the role of the Nyam in practice and how we can begin to stabilize it?
Okay, so Nyam, in the Tibetan tradition, they talk about Nyam and Tokpa. Nyam means all the experiences that we can have rising in meditation, and Tokpa means a realization of the nature of the mind. So anything which is not a realization of the mind is classified as Nyam. So Nyam, or these meditative experiences, could be physical or mental. I mean, but they encourage us to trust that something is going on inside, right? When we have various kind of strong feelings, emotional feelings or physical feelings or whatever, at least we know we may or we may not have any realization of the nature of the mind, but at least our body and our energy system or our consciousness is being affected by the practice, right? And so what it's trying to do is to adjust itself so it will all flow very smoothly on whatever level. So that's why things change. So we can have good Nyam, like bliss or clarity or visions, clairvoyance, all sorts of things can arise, which can be very reassuring. Oh, look, goodness, you know. And as long as we don't cling to that and want that to always happen, otherwise we think things are not going well, then, you know, there's no problem with it. I mean, it's an encouragement, right? And also there are bad Nyam, I mean, unpleasant Nyam, which we should not try to resist. You know, that we can, you know, people hope that they're going to get bliss, but they might get great upsurges of fear or anger or lust, you know, completely, you know, like a volcano, right? Sometimes the body shakes. Somebody I knew used to hiccup very loudly all the time, right? But all of this is just passing phenomena, right? It should be noted, but it shouldn't be considered anything more than a signpost on the path. That's all, you know. So I would say basically just relax, let whatever happens, whether it's rainbows or it's storm clouds, it's all just happening in the space of the mind. And, you know, we should just allow it to come and to pass. And, you know, if it's nice, we enjoy it. And, you know, if it's not nice, we don't fear it. We allow it to manifest. And don't grasp at rejection either. We just allow everything to just come out and manifest. Then, you know, Nyam is good. I mean, it's not a bad thing. But it's not in itself the point, if you see what I mean. There's a story, I don't think it was Milarepa, somebody else, some big yogi was sitting in his cave, some master yogi, and one of his disciples started flying backwards and forwards and doing loops in the space in front of him. And the master said, yes, that's very nice, I can see you've got some Nyam. Now keep practicing and you'll get some actual realization. So.
Very nice. That's something. That's really something. Well, at least I guess Nyam, it's at the very least a sign that we're practicing.
Well, it shows that something's changing inside and something is being activated. The main problem is when people cling to that too much, then they will get lots of Nyam. But it will act as an obscuration for getting actual genuine realization. And like getting highs, you know, you take drugs in order to get a high. And so then that's all they're practicing for is the highs. And if they don't get that, then they think nothing's happening. And that can be an obstacle.
So the next question says, what is the purpose of prayers, such as opening prayers that we say every morning, like refuge, the four immeasurables? How do we bring them into daily life to support our practice?
Oh, well, you know, I mean, daily prayers like refuge and the four immeasurables, etc., are means to motivate our minds ready for the following practice that we're going to do and throughout the day, right? I take refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, the Sangha. I practice bodhicitta. and the paramitas, such as generosity. I will undertake this practice for the welfare of all beings. May all beings be happy and free from suffering. So what we're doing is we're setting our GPS, right? This is the goal we're going towards, you know, that we want enlightenment for the sake of all beings. And then that we will travel with that during our daily life, you know? I mean, that's the point. We're setting our where we're going to at the beginning, and then as we drive through our daily life, we know we're on track. Right? You understand? I mean, it motivates us. At the beginning, the Dalai Lama says every morning he recites the 8 verses of mind training. It's a reminder. And then throughout the day, he, you know, if somebody's very difficult or something difficult happens, he can bring back to his mind that verse which he recited that morning on how to deal skillfully with difficult situations and difficult people. Because he's got it there in his mind. He's motivated himself from the very beginning, every day. So this is good. So we don't forget, because we get so caught up in our habitual thinking and we forget what we're trying to do with our day. Very easy to forget. So we have to make a habit, right? We have to make those neural pathways going up, full of refuge and bodhicitta and loving kindness and compassion, right?
Thank you very much, Atsumala. Okay, finally, question number 13 says, a friend has recently died. What can I do to help ease her way through the bardo? During formal practice, I have been reciting manis while visualizing her in front of me. I have also been doing medicine Buddha and Tonglen with her in mind. Although I am not sure these practices are appropriate for the deceased, is there a simple POA practice that an inadequate practitioner such as myself can perform?
Well, it seems to me that she was a very fortunate friend, you know, to have someone like her, you know, the dead person, that to have somebody reciting manis and medicine Buddha mantras for them. You know, wasn't she lucky? Often people also do Amitabha prayers, because Amitabha's Pure Land is the easiest one to go to. Here in the nunnery, we do Akshobhya prayers to go to the Buddha of the Eastern direction. And every month on the dark of the moon, the nuns do a special Akshobhya puja specifically for calling in the beings from the bardo and liberating them to Akshobhya's Pure Land. POA actually needs to be done either at the time of death or very soon afterwards, and really by a competent practitioner. Otherwise, it probably is a bit late by now. So just recite the mantras. Wish your friend a safe journey. Remind them that everything which they're experiencing is just a projection of their mind. It's also a good thing to make merit on their behalf at this time. So maybe, you know, I mean, here we sometimes encourage people to go on pilgrimage, but maybe that's a bit difficult. But maybe make some kind of donation to their favorite charity or something like this and dedicate the merit to them. Because in the bardo, it's very important to have as much positive karma as possible, especially to counterbalance anything negative. But just remind them also that anything that they're experiencing in the bardo is just a projection of the mind, and they shouldn't, it's like a dream. They shouldn't believe in it as being actually real and true. And really, I think she's doing wonderfully well for her friend. And she should, you know, the friend, I hope, is very grateful to have someone doing so much practice on their behalf.
Well, that was another brilliant session, Jetsumala. Thank you so much. And since we are almost at the end of this, year 2022 has gone, may I request you to give us, lead us in a dedication, but also to give us some words for the upcoming year?
Well, you know, I mean, what can I say? We must hope that the coming year will be a good one. We can hope. Again, what I always say, and I really feel it from my heart, is that what we must not do is to increase the negativity which is being put out into this world through people's paranoia, anxiety, anger, and general despair and depression. Aileen, who many of you know, Aileen Barry, she sent the Christmas address of our King Charles. You know, we have in England we have a tradition of the sovereign always gives a Christmas address. So previously it was always the Queen, and this time for the first time it was the King, and it was a beautiful address. I found it very, very moving, in which he was paying credit to all the people who keep society under balance. You know, the police, the medical corps, people who look after the homeless, people who do so many good things in the world. He was bringing all the goodness in the world. He wasn't talking about all the things which are wrong, and all the violence and all the disruption and all the difficulties. But he was talking about all the people who do so much good for society very selflessly, often without any, you know, particular rewards coming from that. And I thought that was very moving. And I think it's very important to think of the goodness in the world and all the goodness that people do, which is not accredited, which is not headlines in the media, and which is often overlooked. But there is so much goodness in this world. And there is so much goodness within each one of us. And that is what we have to hold to. And that is what we have to bring out and benefit many, many beings around the world, even if it's not ever, you know, recognized or appreciated. It's there. So this again is mudita, rejoicing in the goodness. Rejoicing in all the beauty in the world, all the goodness, the kindness, the compassion, the unselfishness. Just to rejoice in that and to bring that into the new year. So may you all be well and happy. And I'm sure Philippe will work out what to do next.
Yes, we will announce the next Q&A in the first one of 2023 later on. But I would like to really, from my heart, thank you, Jutsumala, for the precious opportunity that you've given all of us to ask you questions and get your wonderful, brilliant answers and guidance. And again, to express my gratitude to everyone who's been participating of this session, to people that have been sending questions, but also the ones who watch the videos afterwards in Facebook and YouTube and engage with their content, and continue to be curious and to be interested in the Dharma, because I think it's very important in this day and age to have that very sincere spiritual inclination, and I really appreciate that from everyone and anyone that's coming here. So thank you all so much, and until next year, Happy New Year to everyone. See you next
Happy
time.
New Year. Happy New Year.